we can open it up to perhaps Larry telling us a little bit about what is Kundalini and how do you experience it?
Thought I'd take a slightly different tack and just go dive into the scriptures. But there's a reason, because Baba emphasized so much about Kashmir Shaivism, and more towards the end of his time on the planet, he focused us, drove us literally to study Shaivism, and he said, "It is the scripture, it is the philosophy, it is in fact the practice more so that best suits the West." And as you know, it was 50 years ago this year in September that he first came to the West to spread his teaching. So I thought, let's establish a little bit of a base for understanding Kundalini. So I'll just dip in and out of some of the scriptures and some of the things. I've just kind of gathered some material here. So, first of all, if we look at Kundalini, Kundalini is this power within us, but it's not that it's mysterious at one level. It has two aspects: transcendent and immanent. And the transcendent aspect of the Kundalini actually runs this entire universe. Okay, it's the substratum. It's the substratum. And the immanent is that power that we would like to have awakened from a spiritual sadhana point of view. So the goddess, that energy that drives this world, which scientists have discovered in the Big Bang, but they have no sense of the consciousness inherent in Kundalini. So when they describe it, and I've shared with you previously how they talk about the Big Bang, they just say there was a moment and everything exploded. And it's continued to grow and expand and grow and expand and grow and expand. And, took 380,000 years before that first moment, before it started to congeal into something that we could call something. And then it goes on. And they can lay it out quite clearly, but there's no sense of why, how, where did it come from, what was the meaning of it. So we're kind of left with, from a scientific point of view, an amazement, like, wow, isn't that amazing how it just, but we don't have any sense of meaning, purpose, and why. And this is where the spirituality comes into everything. It's what gives meaning, understanding, and purpose. So if we look at that underbelly, the fundamental organizing intelligence of embodied consciousness that's there, and it sits. Now, if you go to the scriptures tell us, well, that was consciousness, God, the self, Shiva manifesting, which is one of his five powers: creation. And he does that. He creates, he sustains. You see, we're all still here. It hasn't gone. He withdraws, he conceals. And concealment is a really important aspect, because concealment is one of the things that we are grappling with as seekers. The truth of who we are is concealed. And so we go through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, just living a life, good, bad, indifferent. And then we reach a point where we feel like some version of, there's got to be more than this. There's got to be some purpose, some meaning. And I don't know how each of you may have experienced that in your life, because I know you did, because you're here listening to us talk about it. I know for myself, the beginning was as a young boy, 7, 8, 9 years old, going out and playing like all the young kids do. But at the end of the day, on hot days like it is today, I would kind of, before coming home from dinner, I would kind of look up at the sky as it's getting dark and think, what is all of this? What's the purpose? What's the meaning? And then, typical of a young boy, you can't hold that kind of thought very long. So back in the house. But I look back on it now in hindsight, and I realize that that's the beginning. That kind of reflection and thought and musing is the beginning. And each of you will have your sense, and the other presenters will share their experience of that. And finally, it reaches a point where in my 20s, it becomes like something that I can't put aside. What is this all about? Ultimately, it drives an awakening to something more. So, an awakening that says, I feel this connection, literally experience of feeling a connection to things, all things in this universe, or at least in my immediate environment, and wondering, oh my God, that's not how I thought the world was. I thought we were all separate individual beings, but then I'm experiencing some connection. And that's a kind of awakening. So in Shaivism, they talk about it and they call it grace, for lack of a better word. That Shaktipat is a kind of grace. And it is the grace of God, the inner self, Shiva, whatever name you want to give to this ultimate creative power of the universe. A couple of points that I want to make is that one, that grace is literally a gift, and it is grace. And in a sense, you don't, how would I put this? It doesn't have to do with your worth. Let me put it that way. It's not about your worth. It's actually about your seeking. So when one starts to seek, one starts to look for something more, that's when it just draws that grace. Okay, and that's a really important point. So sometimes a person doesn't even see themselves as a seeker. They're not even on, quote, a spiritual path. But because they're longing for something more, something deeper, it draws the grace of God. And then we have some version of an awakening, some version of awakening. And that whatever that version is, be it strong or weak, there is no difference. It will always lead us to the same conclusion, as it were. And it'll take us further and further. So a couple of things that I was going to say is that Shaktipat is spontaneous. It can happen at any point in time. And it gives us the impetus to pursue our spiritual path, whatever that path is, with more purpose, with more vigor, with more energy. We still have to keep pursuing, okay? We still have to keep pursuing. So it is the awakening, the Shaktipat, that actually draws the person to the spiritual path. And then we can have another level of, if you will, initiation, like we can receive from a great realized being, a great Siddha master like Baba Muktananda, which then takes us further. But the awakening is a part, I'll stress this again, of every spiritual tradition. It's highlighted in the Siddha tradition because that's what it's all about. And even though Baba came to the West and talked about meditation initially and a revolution of meditation, he didn't say anything about Kundalini initially. But when you went to an intensive, that's when you heard about Kundalini. And actually, we received initiation, a formal initiation or diksha. So I would say the first sutra, one of the classical texts of Kashmir Shaivism, says, Chitti Svatantra Vishwa Siddhi Hetuhu, which basically means that awareness, Chitti, another word for Chitti is awareness, free and independent, no one controls it, it is truly God within us, is the cause of the performance of everything. So it's the cause of this universe. Now, when we think of it like that, then awareness itself is the goddess, is the Shakti, is the Kundalini. And so when it's awakened from the base of the spine, and you don't have to believe in that in a physiological sense, but because it's in the subtle body for one thing. But the point about it is it starts a true opening and a true path to the final goal. And that's what we have to understand. So awakening brings us fully to the path, and then we engage with that path at the level that our karma and our samskaras bring us to. So the other speakers will talk more about it, but what I want to say is that there are different levels. Strengths is probably a better word of awakening. Okay? Strong down to weak. Point here, there's no difference whether your awakening was strong, and I'm sure some of us will share some powerful experiences, or what you might call weaker, more subtle. The end is still the same. Again, it has nothing to do with worth or value or how whether you're going to get there or not. Everybody will get there. So the scriptures talk about, well, I don't want to get too complicated, but they talk about 9 different types. And if you want to break it up, and within each of strengths, within each of those, there are 3 more. So you could say there are 27 different strengths of Shaktipat and awakening. I'm going to give you what I call a more potted version of that. So the first one would be the strongest. And I was teasing with some of the other presenters just yesterday and saying that the scriptures say when a person receives that, it is so strong that one is instantly realized and liberated to the point where they just leave the body, gone. So I guess there's a good and a downside of that, depending on how you look at it. I'm out of here. I'm gone. Okay. The second level of strength is powerful as well. And one has the experience of their connection to everything, the whole cosmos, but they still are in the body. They understand a lot, but they may need some refinement and some guidance. Because remember, and many of you will have had initial experiences where you think, oh my God, what happened? I'm out of my body. This has happened. What does all of this mean? So even a person who's receiving that level of awakening could have the same lack of understanding. And that's where, again, a guru comes in handy to just refine the understanding so then that being moves on. And these first 2 types clearly are going to, achieve liberation in this lifetime. Third level is not quite so strong. But what it does awaken is an intense desire to follow the spiritual path. And one of the things that it also awakens is an intense desire to find a teacher that can help one with that. And that's very important. But the other thing about these awakenings is that one of the things that Shakti does when it's awakened is it starts to cut through our web of karma, not for this lifetime, we still have that to live out, but for the lifetimes that could be coming. So it cuts through that, and that's what it allows us to potentially achieve liberation in one lifetime. When Baba would talk about it, when he did start talking about this awakening, he would often say, 3, 6, 9, 12, whatever, how many years. And, in the beginning, people would say, really? I mean, how could that happen so quickly? Look at all you've gone through. And he would use then the analogy of Singer sewing machines. And they would say, Bobby, it took you so long. You're a great yogi. You traveled the length and the breadth of India and all of that. And then you still have to meet your guru and put in a further 12, So he said, have you heard of Singer sewing machines? Everybody, yeah. What does that got to do with anything? He said, well, the Singer sewing machine, when Singer invented it, he did a lot of work to finally come up with it. Now, you or I, we can go to a store and buy a sewing machine. We don't have to go through inventing a sewing machine. So he said, yes, I went through all of that. But because I went through all of that, you don't have to go through all of that. So yes, you can achieve it in this lifetime. And that's where a lot of the karma and some scars come in as well. So it is possible. And even the next few levels of Shaktipat, people can still, depending on one's commitment to the path, one's love of one's own inner self, God, guru, whatever you want to call it, can still achieve liberation in this lifetime. I'm just telling you what the scriptures and the great sages have said. So it's a really powerful reflection if you think about, if you just reflect on that, if you just reflect on the fact that, wow, if I'm drawn to this, if I'm willing to commit to this, I can achieve it even in this lifetime. And some of those next levels are saying that you may not achieve it until your death. So that may be when you achieve liberation. So hang in there. Anyway, we just keep hanging. So the only thing that we have control over, and the Shiva Sutra said again, a seeker is one who makes an effort. That's the only thing that we have control over. So if we have an effort, if we have a strong pull, if we have love for the path, if we have love for the teaching, the scriptures, our teacher, all of those are the things that we can control that make the greatest difference. Now, the last three or four, not as strong. What's the difference? The difference there is that some people, even though they're interested in the spiritual path, they might have an equal or stronger interest in things of the world, attachment to things of the world. Okay? Now, Shaivism doesn't say this is bad, and I want to stress that point. They don't say there's something wrong with that. That's all fine. They allow for bhukti, enjoyment, as well as mukti, liberation. But it does say that if you are drawn to that, you will get those things, but it might slow down your spiritual progress. So that's the only difference. And so that's a person who may be, and the scriptures literally say that, they may achieve liberation after death or a little later. Don't ask me what that means. Or a little later, or maybe the next lifetime. But even if you reflect on that, and this is how I look at it, what a stunning thing the Shaktipat does for your spiritual, I think, oh my God, we could have been on this planet for millions of lifetimes. And you receive that grace. And at worst, it's going to be the next lifetime. Well, if someone said sign on a dotted line, I would definitely sign on that dotted line. I'll take that, and then I just have to manage my commitment to the path. So if you look at your life, and I looked at mine, I think, yes, that's how it happened. And by that, I mean, from receiving that awakening and spending time around the guru, I found my commitment was greater and greater and greater. And that's what makes the most difference. So being around Baba, for me, it was like being in that energy, that awakened energy. So it resonates more and more with yourself. Or if you're just doing the practices, it's the same thing. You find the practices are things that you're drawn to more and more and more. Now, I'm mindful of my time, and I just want to say one more thing, because, and I'm saying this hopefully to preempt maybe some of the questions that you might have. Not that I don't want to hear your questions, they're great too. But a lot of times people say, well, how do I know I've received Shaktipat? What are the signs? So I'm going to read some just of the signs, and you just think about yourself and whether some of those fit, because some of them are not like what you would think. But I make this point again. The most significant thing about Shaktipat is not the experience that you have when you have Shaktipat. It's the effect on your life. Can I say that again? It's not the experience, because you'll have lights and bells and whistles, some people, and others very subtle. It's not the experience, it's the effect on your life. So, some of them are very subtle, but these are the kinds of things that are signs. You find worldly forms of fun less inviting, less, satisfying. You're fascinated by spiritual teachings, even if you don't understand them. I love that one. Even if you don't understand it, you find yourself drawn to a healthier diet. You feel reverence and respect for spiritual teachings and spiritual teachers. You'll find tears of joy just well up spontaneously at times, and you don't even, know exactly why. But particularly when you witness acts of compassion and just devotion. You find that mantras are now very effective for you, for example. Yoga practices, all of the different kinds of yoga practices, especially meditation, you're drawn to, and you find that you get significant benefit. Um, you may feel yourself more sensitive and vulnerable at one level, but at another level, you find greater strength as well. So there's a paradox there, you know. Um, you find it harder in some ways to relate to friends who are not on the spiritual path, but you have an understanding of that's where they are in their life. um, Again, when you hear the words of a great spiritual master, they they resonate deeply on a very deep level. They're not just words, but they just kind of resonate very powerfully within. And not to go on, but one of the ones that I think and I feel strongly about is that when you get quiet and turn within, you feel something. It's like a subtle presence when you do that. So these are all the signs that something has been awakened. And that's really the essence of Shaktipat. Now, like I said, you can then come to a great siddha master and they give you the touch and all sorts of things can happen. But most of us, many of us, have had an awakening of some sort that brought us to the path. I'll leave it to my colleagues to unpack all of that.